She called at 2 in the morning, and I knew before I answered that something had shifted, because Maya Solano did not call. She texted. She had texted me for 6 years, through every crisis, every bad date, every family argument, every work disaster, always text, always precise, always with the particular efficiency of a person who knew exactly what she wanted to say and said it without preamble. She called at 2 in the morning, and I answered on the second ring, and she said, "I need to tell you something, and I'm a little bit drunk, so you have to promise not to make it weird." I said, "Okay." She said, "I think I'm in love with you." Then there was a long pause, and then she said, in a completely different voice, "Oh no." And then she hung up. My name is Declan Shaw. I'm 35. I do structural surveying. I look at buildings and figure out what's holding them up and what isn't, which is not as dramatic as it sounds, and occasionally exactly as dramatic as it sounds. I live in a ground floor flat on the kind of street where everyone has a dog and nobody knows anyone else's name. I have one bookshelf that has outgrown itself, a kitchen I actually use, and a spare room that functions as an office except when Maya stays over, which is often enough that there's a phone charger in the wall socket beside the sofa bed that belongs to her. Neither of us had ever mentioned it. It had simply become part of the flat's infrastructure, the way certain things do when someone is in your life in a load-bearing way. Maya was 33. She was a music therapist, which meant she spent her days using sound to reach people that other methods hadn't reached. And she was very good at it, in the specific way that people are good at things that were already in them before they trained for them. She had dark hair she wore up during the week and down on weekends, a laugh that arrived without warning and departed the same way, and the quality of someone who listened to you the way most people don't, not waiting for her turn, not formulating, just actually in it with you. We had met at a mutual friend's birthday party 6 years ago. She had strong opinions about the playlist. I had made it. We argued for 20 minutes and were inseparable after that, which is either a paradox or a perfectly logical origin story depending on how you look at it. The existing arrangement was this. We were best friends. We talked every day, saw each other most weekends, had standing Thursday dinners that had survived job changes and moves, and a period where we'd both been in relationships that neither of us, in retrospect, had been particularly invested in. I had told myself, for most of those 6 years, that this was simply what a good friendship looked like. I had been telling myself that with increasing effort for the last 18 months. I did not sleep after she hung up. I lay in the dark and had the conversation I'd been not having for a year and a half. But quietly, internally, with no one to answer back. I thought about the Thursday dinners and the way she always took the chair closest to the window because she liked the light, even in winter. I thought about the charger in the wall. I thought about the 2 relationships that hadn't gone anywhere and the specific way I'd felt when they ended. Not sad, exactly. More like relieved, and then troubled by the relief. And then very careful not to look directly at why. By 4 in the morning, I had arrived at a conclusion I should probably have arrived at much earlier. By 5, I had decided what I was going to do about it. The question was not whether she had meant it. Maya was honest, even sober. Drunk, she was simply honest without the management layer. She had said it clearly and specifically and in her own voice, and the "oh no" after it was not the sound of someone who had said something false. It was the sound of someone who had said something true before they decided to. The question was whether I was going to let her pretend she hadn't. I decided I wasn't. She texted at 8:47 the next morning. I was already up, already dressed, already in the kitchen making coffee with the focused attention of a man who is doing something with his hands, because the rest of him is very busy. The text said, Completely fine if we just never discuss last night. I looked at it for a long time. Then I typed, "I'll be at yours in 20 minutes." She sent back 3 dots. Then they disappeared. Then, Declan. I sent 20 minutes. I brought coffee in a thermos because she didn't have good coffee at her place, which had been a point of gentle contention for 6 years. I brought it because it was a thing I knew about her, and I was done pretending that knowing things like that was ordinary. She buzzed me in without saying anything on the intercom, which meant she was nervous, which meant she remembered, which I had already known. Her flat was on the 3rd floor. She was standing in the open doorway when I got there, in a gray jumper and bare feet, hair down, holding her own coffee in a mug from a ceramics market we'd gone to last autumn. She looked like someone who had slept badly and was doing the mental calculation of how much she could plausibly deny. I handed her the thermos. She looked at it. "You brought coffee," she said. "You never have good coffee." "I have perfectly adequate coffee." "You have beans from a petrol station and a cafetiere you haven't descaled since the previous government." I nodded toward the flat. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. I came in. Her flat was warm and slightly chaotic in the specific way of someone who is organized about important things and relaxed about everything else. There were books on the coffee table and sheet music on the kitchen counter and a plant by the window that was thriving against all odds. I had spent a lot of time in this flat. I knew where the good mugs were and which drawers stuck, and that the bathroom tap needed a particular angle to stop dripping. She sat on the sofa and tucked her feet under her, which was what she did when she was preparing to manage a situation. I sat in the chair opposite and did not let her open. "I'm not here to make it weird," I said. "You came over in 20 minutes with a thermos." "That's not weird. That's just accurate." I looked at her. "I'm not going to let you tell me you don't remember. You remember." A pause. Something moved across her face, not quite relief, not quite apprehension, something in between. "I know I remember." "Okay. I was hoping you'd let me. I know. I'm not going to." She looked at the coffee in her hands. Her voice, when it came, was quieter. "I've been very careful, Declan. For a long time. I knew what I was risking, and I was careful. And then I had 3 glasses of wine at Priya's birthday. And apparently," she made a small gesture, "apparently I ran out of careful." "How long?" I said. She looked up. "How long have you been careful?" Her fingers tightened around the mug, the ceramics market one, pale clay with an uneven rim, bought because she'd said it felt right in her hand. She had used it every time I'd been here since. "About 2 years," she said. "Maybe a little more." Something in my chest snapped into place. "I need to say something," I said. "And I need to say it before you decide whether last night counts or not. Because I don't want you to make that decision based on not knowing this." She was very still. "I have been," I said carefully, "doing the same thing. For roughly the same amount of time. I have been very precise about calling it friendship. I've been very deliberate about not looking at it too directly. Because you are the most important person in my life, and I was not willing to risk the version of it I had." I watched her eyes change. I've turned things down. Decisions I told myself were about other things. I've measured situations against how they'd affect Thursdays. I think I've probably known for a long time, and simply been very committed to not knowing. The flat was quiet. Outside somewhere, a dog barked twice and stopped. "You're not saying this," she said slowly, "because you feel sorry for me." "No. Or because it was 2 in the morning and I said a thing and you want to? Maya. I looked at her directly. I brought you coffee because you don't have good coffee, and I know that. I know what you take in it, and which chair you like, and that you will always choose the window. I know that when you're thinking through a problem, you go quiet for exactly long enough that other people think you've disengaged, and you never have. I know that the last time I was properly happy was a Thursday. I stopped. That is not friendship with better branding. I've just been very stubborn about calling it something else. She stared at me. Her voice had gone very quiet. 2 years. Give or take. We've wasted 2 years. We haven't wasted anything. I meant it. We've been building something. We just weren't calling it what it was. She set the mug down on the coffee table, carefully. Then she looked at me with the expression she had when she was done managing, done with the layers, the efficiency, the precision. Just her. I nearly didn't call. I had my phone out and I put it away twice. What made you call? I was tired, she said simply. I was so tired of knowing something true about myself and not saying it out loud. She paused. Also, Priya told me if I didn't do something about it, she was going to tell you herself, so there was a deadline. I laughed. She laughed. It was the real laugh, the one that arrived without announcement, and the room changed with it, or I changed in it. The particular change of a person who has been holding something carefully for a long time and is finally allowed to put it down somewhere safe. I crossed the room and sat beside her on the sofa, and she turned toward me, and I held her face in both hands the way you hold something you are very glad to still have. And she leaned into it and closed her eyes. And that was that. Or rather, that was the beginning of that. Which is different. A second later, her phone lit up on the coffee table with a text from Priya that said simply, Maya picked it up, showed it to me, and typed back, handled. Priya's response was a string of emojis I will not reproduce here. I made a mental note to thank her, and then another mental note to never let her know I was thankful because she would find it insufferable. 5 months later, she left more than the charger. A jumper, initially. Then the good coffee beans, because she said my machine was better than hers, which was true. Then a toothbrush, introduced without ceremony, which felt like the real thing, not the conversation on the sofa, not any of the moments in between, but the specific quiet domesticity of a toothbrush appearing in a holder as though it had simply always belonged there. The spare room was still technically the office. We had not discussed this. We did not need to. A year after that, she told the drunk call story at my colleague's dinner party to a table of people who were largely strangers to her, with the enthusiasm of a person who has made peace with their own history. She told it well. She got to the oh no and paused for effect, and the table laughed, and she looked at me sideways with the expression she had when she knew exactly what she was doing. I told my version less often. When I did, I started from the decision in the dark at 4 in the morning, the part where I decided I wasn't going to let her pretend. When people asked what made me do it, I said, I survey buildings for a living. I know what's load-bearing and what isn't. I know the difference between a wall you can take down and a wall the whole thing depends on. I just finally stopped pretending I didn't know what she was. What would you have done if someone called you at 2 in the morning and said the thing that changed everything, and then went quiet? And have you ever known something true about how you felt and spent a long time being very careful not to say it? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.